Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mosaic podcast. And I know most of the time I start out, I'm always really amazed at the people and the connection and the way these podcasts happen. Because first of all, I'm finding that some of the most interesting people in the world are being drawn to the podcast and being drawn to me. But it's even more than that. The connection that we have. I just had some time to talk to Lorna Davis now in the green room before we jumped on here. And it's uncanny that it's a person that I've never met before. I would feel so absolutely connected to, as if she was my sister from 1,000 years. And that we shared just this resonance of spirit, this resonance of, she's brilliant. We don't share the resonance of brilliance because she has a brilliance, but her way of living in the world, her way of seeing the world, and the way that I've grown to see the world that I live in are so beautiful because they're just different perspectives looking at the same point. And it's intoxicating to me that it would be that beautiful. So I'm not a big bio guy. You can read all of what she does on her website. I want you to know, though, that she has transformed the ways leaders operate. She is working with B Corps now. She ran a major corporation. She's worked in 7 continents. And she is somebody who knows her P's and Q's around how businesses function, how life functions, how people function, and how things really get done in the world. And so now she's a global ambassador for the B Corp movement, and she's passionate about wildlife conservation, particularly the plight of the African rhino, which we will definitely get into. But Lorna, I just want to say what an absolute joy it is. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving of your time to be here with us today. And Mosaic audience, you were in for a treat. I met her through a TED Talk that she gave, and I will put that TED Talk reference in the show notes. But just glean everything you can from this conversation. So without the monologue that's becoming, I'm going to shut up now and just say, Lorna, welcome to the Mosaic podcast.
Thanks, Danny. Good to be here.
It's such an honor, such an honor. Excuse me. So in jumping in, I always ask sort of an interesting question just to get started. And that question is, what did your parents do?
My dad was in construction. My dad had fought in the war from the Second World War from 17 to 23, which when you think about it is a pretty extraordinary way to spend the extraordinary time of your life, and then came out not sure what to do. So he became what was known in South Africa as a quantity surveyor. I think here in the US they would call it an estimator, somebody who worked out how much a job would cost. Worked for the same construction company his whole life, retired, and years later he died, which I think had a big impact on me. And my mom was a homemaker. So she had had a few jobs as a bookkeeper before she married, but she didn't work all the time that I was growing up.
So where did your thirst for all that you've done start?
I think it started with simple curiosity. I grew up in South Africa. South Africa in those days, bear in mind that I was born in 1959, so I grew up through the apartheid era.
You're just a baby.
Yes. And in those years, South Africa was, as Mandela called us, the skunk of the world.
Wow.
And it was a very constricted society. We had no television until 1977, which is after I left school. And so everything was controlled. The media was all controlled, obviously, by the government. And I just remember from early on feeling this sense of constriction in this sort of oppressive environment, and wanting to get out and see what the rest of the world was like. So sort of I took my first opportunity, and then it's just been about following little threads, really. I never expected to be in business. I never expected to be, quote, successful in any way. I just wanted to find out about things. And that's kind of how my journey unfolded.
It's really interesting as you say that, because for all those people that say you have to visualize and affirm, sort of in that new agey world, you have to hold the image of what you want to do and do it. That wasn't at all how you did it.
No, I don't think it's how most people did it. I mean, I remember watching Steve Jobs's commencement speech, the famous one where he talked about, having a dream. And I remember being really angry at that speech. And I remember being surprised at why I was angry. And thinking, that's a strange reaction to have had to that talk. And I realized that it was because I was confronted really in a way for the first time by the fact that I'd never had a plan.
Right.
I'd never had any clue. And I always thought I was supposed to. And I never understood people that had this kind of inner burning thing, because I'd never had an inner burning thing. I just kind of picked up a crumb that came along, in retrospect. I guess it was curiosity or hunger or desire to learn or whatever, but it never was a, quote, plan. It was very much more outer directed than that.
So for people who are listening, which I always like to just sideline for a minute, because for people that are listening that have been told all their life, if you don't have a plan, you won't succeed. If you don't know where you're going, you will never get there. What would you say to those people? Because clearly that wasn't the way you did it, and you achieved amazing success in the life that you connected to.
Well, I would say that the only way to live for me now, and I would encourage others, if this is their way, to take the next step that happens to open up in front of you.
Wow.
And I think, there are some people who do have this burning vision, and that's terrific. But if you're not one of those people, take the next step that appears to be obvious to you. And it's a little bit like, Martha Beck, who I'm a big fan of. She writes a lot of interesting books and has been on Oprah. She uses the metaphor of tracking a wild animal, where she says, if you're trying to track a wild animal, the first thing that you do is go back to the last time that there was evidence of that animal. And then you make some predictions based on where that paw happened to be pointing, or what, bush happens to be disturbed. And that place is the place of joy and love and aliveness. Yeah. So if you've lost your way, think back to the time that you were the most alive, you were the most connected to yourself, to your life force, and then connect to that, and then take the next obvious step and see what happens.
So I can't tell you how much I respect and admire you for even just having the courage to say what you just said. Because I think part of the problem that exists, that I see in the world that I live in, is that people have lost that connection to themselves, because they are following plans and agendas and strategies, because they've been told don't reinvent yourself. Do what other people have done and you'll get successful. But what I found in the work that I do with people is they may be financially successful, but they're not fulfilled. And so how does someone who is stuck in a strategy, in a plan, who is not happy or not feeling the happiness that they feel, get the courage to say, hold on 1 minute. I'm just going to allow myself to, like a mosaic, to connect piece by piece by piece to what's on the other side of the pieces that are connecting me to that. Because that takes tremendous courage, I think.
Well, it's funny. I don't know about the word courage. And I don't know the answer to your question, Danny, but I can tell you what I do.
Yeah.
On my desk, I have a snow globe. And it's the most powerful object that I own. Because this metaphor, which I stole from Michael Neal, another person that I admire deeply, really resonates with me. You know, there are times that I get all caught up in my thinking about all sorts of things. I've got all sorts of theories and all sorts of plans, and I have all sorts of conversations with myself because I'm human. That's what we do. And for me, it's just like the snow globe getting churned up. So I pick it up and I shake it around and all these little bits fly around. And that's cool. That's how it is to be human. I don't try and stop them. I don't try and reason with myself to get control of my thinking, because it's just like those snow globes. But then when I put it down and I just take one big breath, what I notice is that those snow flakes settle. And then a new thought arises. And the new thought arises, and it could be helpful, could be not. Sometimes it's, I'm hungry, whatever, it doesn't matter. Right. But what I know is that I do a lot better from a settled mind than I do from a turbulent mind. And I know that when I'm in one of those thought storms, which I get into many, many times a day, like we all do, it's not a great place for me to make a big choice. Yeah. But what I know is that the more often I return to this settled place, the next step becomes obvious. And what's interesting to me is I used to think that it was about courage, but actually I now think it's about obviousness. So there's some, big decisions that we make that are just obvious, like just obvious. And often when I'm speaking to people about this, I ask them about when they married or when they had babies or when they had lunch. They're obvious for many people. Yeah. And so that place in us is a place that I think is a powerful place from which to make big next steps. If it's still a decision that requires courage, it's not cooked yet.
That's right. or to use your example, perhaps it hasn't settled enough yet, because when it's settled, and I love the way this conversation's going, because in the green room before we even got here, yesterday, Ram Dass in the evening passed away. And we had a conversation about how dear he was to us both, and how much, and I had the opportunity to spend time with him and be with him as a friend. And so I know for those people that have the ability to be able to quiet mind, to be able to let the snowflakes settle, that a settled mind is way better than a chaotic mind, right? But it seems like so many people these days have no idea what a settled mind even is. Yeah. And so for those people who have, like, two questions. One, for those people who have no idea what a settled mind is, how would you recommend they settle it? And two, for those people who hear, oh, just follow the obvious. Well, what if it isn't obvious? Like, what if it feels like it seems so obvious sometimes that we should leave the relationship we're in, but it seems so obvious we should also stay in the relationship we're in. Do you know what I mean? My uncle, when I was growing up and he was trying to train me to take over his company, said to me, Danny, you can never go wrong doing the right thing. And I said, what a brilliant statement, except finding the right thing is like, it's like that place of obvious, right? Where what is obvious in one moment may not be obvious in the next to somebody else. So can you talk a little bit about those places?
I can talk about my own experience, and there, as you say in the show notes, people can see my TED Talk. And for me, the way I speak now is very different from the way that I would have spoken 10 years ago, when I was still really caught up in being a hero. And, for much of my life, I looked for those big decisive moments, and I looked for great kind of strategies to work out whether this was the obvious thing or that was the right thing or whatever. And I got lots of joy out of all of that game. And it's a cool game and it's a fun game, right? It's fine if that's what you're into. What I find now, though, the challenge with that for me is that was a very exclusive game. The game was all about me.
Yeah.
And it was all about whether I made the right decision or whether I had done the right thing. It was about me, 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 me. And it had its benefits, and I became successful, and it had its payoff. But its downside was a sense of isolation and disconnection, not only from myself but from others. And so, what I wanted to say two things about a settled mind and about some thoughts about how people might choose to move forward if they're stuck. The first is, I remember for years people used to talk to me about meditation, and I used to roll my eyes. There's no doubt that starting a regular meditation practice changed my life. Totally. Partly because I noticed the habitual patterns of my thinking, or the habitual patterns of those little flakes in the snow globe. And I noticed that I was obsessed with certain thought patterns that I hadn't noticed before. And I found that very useful, very interesting. And in my case, for example, I discovered that about 85% of my random thoughts were about future logistics, which kind of shocked me. They were about, should I catch a taxi to the airport or should I catch the subway? And I wonder, if I catch a taxi, should I call in advance or should I just go down and hail one? And then I would overthink that thing. And then I realized that actually at the end of that tunnel was some assumption that I would be safe if I got it right.
Yeah.
And noticing that shifted a lot of things for me, because that's clearly a ludicrous idea. And I sort of realized that I had made all sorts of assumptions about if this happened, I would be safe. If that happened, I would be safe. And once I had started to notice that, everything changed. And when I say started to notice, I think it's very important. I started to notice I didn't do anything differently. What I've noticed is that just noticing, Beautiful. The body and the mind and the spiritual system has its own sort of regulation mechanism, and it just takes care of itself. So Beautiful. Just noticing is really, really the key, and not taking the next step, which is trying to fix it, was the first key. Yeah.
Well, I remember a workshop that I was giving in the East Coast at a very uppity spa. And one of the women in the workshop came to me and she said, "Can I speak to you?" And I said, "Of course, that's why I'm here." And she said, "I am like obsessed with the what if moments. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happened?" And I said, "So tell me about that." And she said, "I'm obsessed." When I say obsessed, I have 40 journals in my library, big journals, sometimes 2 or 3 book journals at a time, where I list out the what if scenario. What if this happens? What would I do? What if this happens? What I would do? And I said to her, "Wow, I mean, I bow to your mind. What a glorious thought processes you have. How often have you, now that they're recorded and they're in your library, how often have you taken one of them down and played out the scenario because it actually happened?" She said, "Oh, never. I don't know that it'll ever happen." I said, "So here's what I'd like you to do if you would be willing to. You already know what if to do now. What I'd like you to do is when you go home, do you have a fireplace?" She said, "Oh, yes." I said, "I'd like you to take your 40 journals and I'd like you to put them in your fireplace." I said, "Well, what would I do?" I said, "You'll create another what if journal if you need to, but you may not need to. Just allow yourself to do whatever you do in the moment when it happens." If I were smart enough, I would have said, just do the obvious, because that's what it would have been, because that's a brilliant thing you say. But we're so caught up in that what if.
Yeah.
Or I'll do this when. right?
Well, and I think, I mean, that's one of the things is I think intriguing about the human condition is that we imagine that we will know what will be true at a certain time in the future. So, and that's just simply not true. So if I said to you, Danny, and I'll be simplistic here, if you don't mind, if I said to you, you know, tomorrow at round about this time, you might need to go and pee. And so I want us to discuss the direction between your computer and the bathroom, just in case, because it could be that you're going to need to pee at this time tomorrow. And you would laugh because that's clearly ludicrous because of two things. First of all, you have no idea whether you're going to need to pee this time tomorrow. And secondly, you know where the bathroom is. And so you don't need me to discuss it with you. It's obvious.
Yes.
And so the notion of not getting ahead of ourselves
Yeah.
is kind of the main thing. And the second thing is just trust ourselves to know that it'll be obvious when it's obvious, and to just settle down. And I think the thing that I've shifted on, the sort of settling of the mind, and I love your story about the woman with the journals. Bless, you know, my heart just breaks when I think about her, because she put all that time and energy into this notion that it'll, you know, if she works it out, it will be okay, not knowing that it's going to be okay anyway, or it's not, because we're human, right?
Then it is okay. I mean, it's not even going to be okay. It is okay. Right?
Yeah. But the thing that I think is really interesting for me now on the meditation front and the sort of settled mind front is the reason that I have the snow globe is I'm much more interested in just this moment. So for example, I have my dog is lying here on the floor, and I often look at him to settle me because he's just there.
Yeah.
You know, just happens to be sleeping. I notice he's moved out of the sun into the shade. Okay. And he's just curled up in a ball. Okay. There's nothing that he's thinking about. He's just responding to how he wants to be now. And so he has the same impact on me as the snow globe. And so the idea of just anchoring ourselves on a creature or an object that's in the present moment is so comforting. And then in the time that it takes us to anchor, the next thought will arise, which will be interesting or it won't. But just settling that noise, it really helps me.
Yeah. Again, it's so interesting because of our conversation about Ram Dass and the book that he wrote, which was his classic book that launched him, was Be Here Now, which is not unlike anything that we're saying right now, right? I mean, it's the classic moment of what would happen if we just lived in this moment now, not in the past with all the stories that we made up about it, not in the future of what could possibly happen, but just know that this moment is perfectly intact. So is this an evolution of who you were from the business world that you were in, or was this the practice that somehow infiltrated itself into you while you were practicing business as well?
Well, I think I had sort of multiple threads, as we do. So I fell in love with Ram Dass in the 80s, and I remember I had one of those 8 tape box sets of his that I used to play in my car as I rode around Sydney. I was living in Sydney in that time, and I used to listen to him, you know, on repeat. I used to listen to those tapes over and over. And at the same time, I was doing my job and falling in love and doing all the things that people do. And it was sort of, I saw it as sort of separate from my day-to-day life. I saw it was just a thing that I did while at the same time I was earning a living and doing, quote, the right things. And it's in retrospect, of course, that's one of the benefits of aging. In retrospect, I see how the threads came together and how he influenced a lot of my leadership. And in a way, even as I was fully invested in this, you know, drive for success, heroic approach to life, it was there. He was there. You know, there was still a love and a connection underneath some of the, less spiritual behavior, let's call it. So I guess it's just kind of coming together, as we all do as adults, as we put our experience together with what we read, and
Again, one of the reasons why, without being too narcissistic, I love the idea of a mosaic, and I love the title of the book Mosaic, even though it's not really what I wrote about, but it is really what I wrote about, is the fact that we isolate pieces of our life thinking that they are isolated pieces, when in fact they are pieces that make up the totality of the mosaic of who we are. And even if we don't acknowledge or see the influence that they have in any moment, they still are connected pieces to connected pieces of our life somewhere else, which can't help but infiltrate into each other. Does that make sense to you?
It does indeed. And in fact, I was just thinking to myself, I wonder how woo-woo I can get. And I thought, well, good grief, I can get as woo-woo as I like on this conversation, is that I have a quote from Ram Dass on my desk that says, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. When I know who I am you. And then, of course, his most famous quote of all, maybe, which says, we're all just walking each other home.
Yes.
And the notion of imagining that we're separate is the big illusion of all, right? So
yeah,
that's
totally.
kind of joke, right?
So stay there with me, because that now we sort of start to come together a little bit, because that, like, I love the conversation of where we've gone. Completely unexpected for me, in terms of when I saw who you were and what you did, and to have this conversation with you is just, beautifully enriching for me. How did it get to be, from your point of view, or even do you agree with it? Let's start with, do you agree with it? Because I don't want to assume that you agree with anything. I have a statement that I say that the lie has become so easy to believe, we call it the truth. And the truth has become so hard to believe, we call it a lie. But the truth is not a lie. And the lie is not the truth. And there are parts of the lie that are the truth. And the truth is that we're connected. We're not separate. But it's so easy. I mean, here you are, this beautiful woman in New York, and I'm this old guy in California, and we're talking through a computer. And how in the world could we possibly say we're connected? Because we're, our forms are in different places. We look different. We've had different experiences. And all the people listening are different. And yet, beneath all that, quantum physics tells us that we're just energy. And that energy doesn't take a form. I mean, it has a form now. It looks, we make the form of you look like you, and the form of me look like me. But what you're inhaling right this minute is what I've exhaled. It's what Gandhi exhaled. It's what Hitler exhaled. I mean, all those molecules are still in the air that we're breathing. And so how did we ever get to the place where we forgot that we're connected? Because it's only the reality of that forgetting that causes us to live in the world that we live in now.
Yeah, but that's what it is to be human. So, I mean, the thing that I'm enjoying about my life now is I have a more compassion. I just have a compassion for our humanity, including my own, in a way that I never had before. This dance that we're in is the dance of being human. And at some level, it's a kind of a cosmic joke. At another level, hell, it's a kind of fun film,
It is
it's like in the movies, if you spend all your time in the movies going, shit, this is a film. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
You're allowed to do anything you want.
This is a film. This is a film. This is a film. Well, that's not so much fun. It's much more fun to say, acknowledge you're in the cinema and then get in and have 2 hours of involvement and immersion, and then leave and go, that was a film. I mean, that's, in a way, that's kind of how it is to be human now, that there are times, I mean, in this, I get caught up all the time because I'm human, of course, and I get into, what should happen and what did happen and whether, because I'm human. And then I want to be fully in it because I want to be fully human. I mean, I don't want to be, like, I think the notion of sort of a lack of attachment, the Buddhist notion of lack of attachment, is cool at some level. And I love being attached to stuff. I do
Yeah.
because I'm human. And so I don't aspire to lack of attachment anymore. I'm just sort of, I like the fact that I can go in and out and in and out and in and out. And I don't want to make myself wrong for being human anymore. And I think the thing that's hilarious in a way, and I was talking to my stepson the other day. My stepson is 26. And when I was in China selling Oreos, he was living with us at that time. And he came to me and he said, I'm really embarrassed about what you do for a living. And I remember giving him a sort of a smart-ass response that said, well, if it weren't for, selling Oreos, I wouldn't be wearing those groovy shoes you're wearing, or something smart. But it penetrated. And we were laughing this week about the fact that it is that experience and that money and power and influence has formed the basis of a talk upon which I rest a bunch of lessons that have been apparently are interesting to other people, but also the basis upon which I rest an interest in wildlife conservation and coaching that I do, and all sorts of other things that I do in the world. And so the notion that, if I were less invested in flogging fat and sugar to Chinese people, my life would have been better is not true. I was in it, and I did it, and I did it well, and I have moved on from it, but I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of it at all, because it was part of the mosaic of my life.
Totally.
And I think that's true for all of us. And again, I know there's some people listening who are thinking, I think your what if person makes me so sad, because good grief, all of us have got a list of what ifs. I think about all and I know Cheryl Strayed, another person that I love, talks about this ghost ship of an alternative life we could have led. It's kind of interesting, but it's not at all. It's this is the one we're in, so might as well get invested in it.
There's something so relaxing and charming in just being involved in what you're involved in, without all the stories or the judgments and the things, and just jumping in. And it's alarming to me in some ways, because I've invested a lot of time in being of this world and in this world, but not of it, is from a Christian perspective, from a Jewish perspective, from a Buddhist perspective, from a Hindu perspective. But as I hear you speak with that simple joy that you have of just enjoying those moments, there's a certain joy that comes when you can abandon all the should be's and have to be's, to just be what's there, to do the obvious. And maybe it's when the mind stops thinking so much and the snowflakes settle to the bottom of the snow globe, that you can see the obvious better, because you're not shaking it up with what you think that it should be.
Well, yes, and I think, I think that the thought trains that I have, obviously, I'm human, right? Every day, all day, often I get caught up in this thought or that thought, which isn't interesting or helpful. And then when I notice it, I go, okay, there we go. Here we go. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I go, not that one again.
Right.
I'm human. But I think the notion that to be human, and by the way, Yuval Harari's book really has made an impact on me, Sapiens and Homo Deus, because again, the notion that humans have been so successful because we're able to think, and we're able to create narratives that hold us together, that perspective really, really comforts me, because I'm like, oh yes, that narrative capability of ours, which is able to kind of thread stories together. And you said something about the truth and the lie, and the lie and the truth, and all that. That's all just part of being this extraordinary species that we are, with all of its ugliness and all of its beauty.
Yeah. So for those people who are listening, and again, I just want to sort of ask the listening audience to participate in this conversation in their own realm. And I guess I hear a voice saying, when you speak of it with so much joy, of just being human and just, okay, so we fell down and we just get up and we, here we are now, we connect to what's in front of us again, and we just walk there, and if we hit a door, if we hit a wall, we just turn around and we walk over. I mean, and really the essence, I say to people oftentimes, we're one thought, one connection, one person, one piece of a mosaic away from an entirely different world. And we have to just take every opportunity that opens and just walk with those into what's possible and see. And you might hit a wall, but so what? You turn around and you walk into the next one. What about for the people that walk into the walls more often than walk into the doors? Is there something that you would say, just keep going? Is there something that they're doing that you would say like needs a certain adjustment? Is there something that it just, you know what I mean? Because like, it's great when you get to the place where you just enjoy it all. And you don't enjoy it all. I'm sure there are moments where you don't enjoy it all. But there's some people that walk into it day after day after day. The homeless guy who can't figure out, how to get food on his table. And what do you say to those people who?
Yeah. So I think this is hilarious in a way, this conversation, because this notion that some of people have got it figured out and some of people haven't got it figured out is a very common one, right? And the fact that I'm healthy and I'm sitting in a nice comfortable house, and so fine for that, fine for you. It is really, so I'll give you an example, right? So I have a very good homeless friend who lives on a park bench in Central Park. His name is Armando, and in fact, you can see, maybe if you Google Armando and Eckhart Tolle, you will see that he's a huge Eckhart Tolle fan, and we managed to get Eckhart Tolle to come and visit him in Central Park. I was engaged with somebody in an email exchange yesterday or the day before about my dog and about what was happening over Christmas. And I sent a photo of Armando cuddling my dog. And the person said to me, he's really lucky. And the reason she thought he was lucky is because she wanted to cuddle my dog Stir Fry. She was in another country. And I laughed to myself because, of course, she is in another country in a comfortable house. And she thinks my homeless friend is lucky because he's cuddling my dog.
Right.
So everything is relative. And I think it's really important for those of us who imagine that we are constantly walking through walls or bashing into walls instead of doors. Two things. First of all, perspective. To spend time with people who are living different kinds of lives from you really helps. Volunteer at a homeless shelter. Go and spend time with people who are in really difficult circumstances. And for everybody who's in a difficult practical circumstance, I can tell you there are other people who are in as difficult practical circumstances as you. And spending time with them will help to shift your perspective. And I really get it. And I get that if you're in a place where you just feel like you're just bashing into walls, hearing this smug, self-satisfied, isn't it fun bullshit can be really frustrating. I get it. And take an opportunity to shift your perspective by spending time with others. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm going to use another metaphor because I like metaphors. About just noticing that this isn't real. So have you ever been hungover, Danny?
Yes, a lot of years ago.
Yeah. So I imagine many of the people on this who are listening to this podcast have been hungover in their time. If you're hungover and you have never ever been hungover before, you think you're going to die.
Yeah.
Right? If you had all those experiences of nausea and headache, you might think you're going to die. And you might want to go to the hospital and you might seek help because you think you're going to die. But if you've been hungover before and you know that this is because you drank too much last night, you're still uncomfortable, but you know it'll pass.
Yeah.
because that's the nature of a hangover. I find this a very comforting notion that when I'm in a difficult circumstance, reminding myself that this will pass because that's the nature of thought is really comforting to me. I still might have a headache. I still might feel nauseous. I still might not want to speak to anybody. I still might be berating myself for whatever it was that I did last night. But I know it will pass.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
The same for all of us when we're in difficult times is just knowing, even though it's painful right now, just knowing that it will pass because it's the way it is to be human. Sometimes it's comforting.
When I was in seminary studying to be a rabbi, we learned about King Solomon, who was the son of King David. And King Solomon would wear a ring on his finger with 3 letters, a Gimel, a Zayin, and a Yud. And the Gimel, Zayin, Yud stood for Gamze Yavod, this too will pass. And so every moment when he was in pain, or every moment when something looked terrible, he would look at his ring and he would see, okay, I just have to sit with it. This is going to pass. Yeah. But in the other way also, every moment when people admired him and loved him and held him up, he also would look at his ring and say, this too will pass. Yeah. And so for us to know that nothing, and really the Mosaic podcast is really one of the premier fundamental belief systems I want people to know, is that no matter where you are in life, this moment will pass. Because here you are, Lorna, you were a hero, selling cookies and all sorts of beautiful things now into a world. And you took an approach to it. Now you're in a different place. Not that you wouldn't do that. Not that it wasn't bad, but you have a different way of looking at it. Every one of us, if we remain open to what's in front of us, have the opportunity to allow the moment before us to become the moment that is us right now.
Yes, and I think the one thing that I notice is a trap for me is when I catch myself in a kind of a sad moment or unhappy moment or troubled moment, the notion of waiting for it to pass is also a trap. Yeah. Again, it's a little bit like the noticing. Just noticing is enough. I don't have to do anything. I just have to notice, and then I need to let my system regulate itself, and it does. I think that whole notion of trusting our systems to just keep on adjusting.
Love it.
Is the key for me.
And talk to me, if you would, about, I mean, we live in a society where it's never okay to feel bad. So like when we feel bad, we want to be out of feeling bad. And we have people that fix us and try and help us. Yeah. But there's actually something so incredibly beautiful that when we listen to what's trying to happen to us and what's trying to be told to us through the experience we're experiencing, something beautiful happens. And when we have the courage to sit in that pain and sit in that emptiness, there's also something that comes to us that is we would never feel before. Tell me what you think about that.
So I think it's so interesting. I was just in the chemist, the drugstore the day before yesterday, and I happened to walk past down that aisle with all of the painkillers, and I thought, wow. I saw them really in a way for the first time ever. I saw how afraid we are of any kind of pain, just even a headache, And I don't think, I mean, the reality, coming back to this notion of being human, I don't think that there's necessarily beauty in pain, but I get that part of the game of being human is to have bad things and good things happen. We've all had loss and pain and struggles, and we will have, because that's what it is to be human. What I've learned, though, is that trying to push it away doesn't help. That, the notion that what we resist persists is true. So I don't think that, pushing away the pain of a painful
Anything.
experience, anything, I don't, it doesn't help me to think, oh, at the end of all of this is going to be some beauty. But what I have learned is pushing away not going to help.
Yeah.
And so just being in it, it'll be what it'll be. And maybe the thought will come up over and over again. I remember there was that fantastic TED talk by the woman who had the stroke, Jill Taylor. And I became fascinated by her. And she talked about she's written a book and she's written a bunch of articles. And she said that, that the chemical impact of an emotion is 90 seconds. So when I think something sad and I start to cry, so for example, earlier we were talking about Ramdas and I teared up.
Yeah.
I hung out in that space. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to have a runny nose, but if I hung out in that space for 90 seconds, it would take 90 seconds for that biochemical reaction to flood through me, and then it would be done. And for me to be upset about Ramdas would need me to think about him again and then again and then again and then again. It's actually 90 seconds of physical reaction or emotional reaction to a thought. What's interesting is a lot of our painful experiences come from thinking the same bloody thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then we go, I can't get it out of my mind. Well, yeah, because so keep thinking about it. So settle down that snow globe and then allow it to pass. And I guarantee you that no matter how difficult your circumstances are, there are periods in any 1 minute or 1 hour time frame that are not sad or painful, because that's a of thought.
Totally.
So just let it be, let it be, let it be. Kind of, it sounds like we're just doing one cliche after the other here, Danny.
I want to share with you because I think you might enjoy it, because you like stories and you like metaphors and you like. I have the honor of having a 30-year-old developmentally delayed daughter. I can't say to you in honesty that that's always been an honor. There have been some times where I literally wanted to just shoot myself because of how painful it was, because she doesn't have the ability to speak like you and I speak. So, and she counts on me to understand her. And so when she'll say something and I don't get it, a lot of times I do get it because we're somehow connected in some way where I just understand her. But when she says something that I don't get it, then what she does is she'll raise her voice and she'll say it louder. And sometimes, to be true and honest, when she raises her voice, her intonation changes a little bit, her inflection changes, a word that I didn't understand before I suddenly do understand, and I do get it, but not very often, because it isn't the volume that's preventing me from hearing it, it's the clarity. When she raises her voice and I don't understand it, then what she'll do is she'll tantrum. And it doesn't matter where we are. She doesn't have, she doesn't care if we're in the middle of a store, in the middle of a nice restaurant having lunch, if we're driving in a convertible car with people like saying, what are you doing to that girl? I mean, all of a sudden she'll just lose it and she'll start screaming. And when I don't get that, then she'll even go one step further. She'll try and rip my shirt or attack me or bite me or do something. And we could be driving in a car and she'll still try and do that. And this went on for a long time, 10, 15 years, sometimes happening as many 5, 6, 8 times a day. You would think I'm sort of intelligent and I would get what was going on, but it took me a long time to understand it. And finally, I said to her, Elisa, can you tell me what you're trying to say without words? Because obviously I'm not getting your words. And she went from the midst of her rage to this just adorable, contagious laugh. And she said, I am, Daddy. And she just started laughing. And I said, you little son of a gun, what are you doing? I mean, how are you doing that? And she took her finger and she put it to her head like this. And because she doesn't have the ability to speak, some of her other instincts are more advanced. And I said, have you been putting thoughts into my mind? And she started hysterically laughing, like I finally got it. After all this time, she went, yes, Daddy. And it seemed like we were laughing for months. It was probably 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like just this intoxicating laugh that took control over all of us. What she taught me is that we all do that same progression. We do it to each other. We do it to ourselves. When there's pain in our being that we don't listen to, it's going to keep talking to us, and it's going to intensify until we allow ourselves to hear it. And so when I say there's a certain joy that comes in sitting in that pain and just listening to it and getting to the place where you can allow it to tell you what it wants to tell you, then it doesn't need to keep receding and keep coming back. Once you get it, from the time I got that she was talking to me and I listened to her in my mind when I couldn't hear her, 4 years ago, she hasn't had a tantrum. She hasn't had a tantrum of yelling because she knows she'll just go like this, go there, Daddy. Right? And so there's something exquisite in that process of just being able to be in that moment, listen to what the moment is saying, and gather from that moment.
That's such a beautiful story for many reasons, Daddy, but two of them spring to my mind. The first is exactly the point you made, that you were looking at the world one way, she was looking at the world the other way, and you were just missing each other.
Yeah.
And I imagine you had lots and lots of stories about what she was and wasn't doing, and what you were or were not doing, and you just stayed stuck. And at some point, your intuition said, there has to be another way of looking at this. And you did, and it unlocked it. And so the question for all of us is, when anything's causing us pain, what's another way of looking at this thing?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That can unlock it. That's one thing that's really powerful. But the second thing that's really powerful that occurs to me is, so I imagine that over the last 30 years, you have practiced the phrase, I have a developmentally delayed daughter, many ways. You've said that phrase many ways to many people, and with many reactions. From, oh my God, you poor thing, to me too, to can we talk about something else? I mean, I imagine many reactions. And one of the things that, and I imagine you have steeled yourself, or you have prepared yourself to deal with those reactions. And I imagine that you also think to yourself, I wonder if this is a good time to bring this up, or should I not? Because it becomes, so there's a bunch of stuff we do when we're in conversation with other people. One of the things that I'm noticing is that it is in the conversations with other people that I get the most trapped. So, for example, when I'll give an example from my own life, right? I'll just give a simple example now. So people say to me all the time today, so what are you doing now? What are you up to? What are you up to? And the true answer to the question is, I have no clue. I don't have a neat answer. I don't have a wrapped up bow. And so what I noticed is that for a long time in the last few months, I started off like making up stuff, make other people feel better, and get into some sort of conversation about the stuff that I just made up. And then I decided to stop doing that. And now I say, well, I don't have a clue. And if you were to follow me around with a video camera, what you will see me doing is, because the reality is that I actually do a lot of things.
Right.
They just don't fit into a neat category. And I'm finding that really nice, because then I don't have to get involved in this nonsense conversation that I just started in a way. And what I noticed is that, for example, when I got divorced, I didn't want to tell people that I was getting divorced, because I didn't want all of the answers that I knew people would get. You poor thing. I never liked him. Why are you getting divorced? I did like him.
Right.
whatever. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? We keep each other stuck a lot. And so one of the things that I think is helpful for us when we are stuck is to change the way we speak about it to other people. And either not talk about it or experiment with talking about it in different ways. Because otherwise we just keep on saying these same things over and over and over, and we stay stuck. And when you have a developmentally delayed daughter, I imagine that there have been many times over the years when people have felt sorry for you. And then if you're feeling sorry for yourself at that particular time, because you're going through a phase where you're finding it difficult, that's kind of like a little happy thing where you feel sorry, they feel sorry, we're all feeling sorry together. And it's cool, and it doesn't really help.
Yeah.
And so what I'm finding more and more is that when I'm speaking with people, and I do quite a lot of coaching now, I guess you call it coaching, I don't know, have conversations with people. I find that they have practiced stories of explaining things to me that are keeping them stuck. And so I just, interesting that I seem to have somebody, why is my whole computer got, just going. I think maybe
I'm here. No, we're here.
Oh, well, I'll just go back to.
You have a pop-up or something.
I had a pop-up that I thought was telling me you wanted me to go away.
I don't want you to go away.
So I think that that's another thing for people to experiment with when they are experiencing that they are banging into walls, to use your expression.
Yeah.
Just to notice how they're speaking about their experience to other people and whether that's helping or not.
I love it. And thank you for your insight on that. I'm going to sit with that too and like grok that, so to speak. And for those people listening, I want you to do the same thing. And are you telling the same stories over and over again? Are you feeling the same feelings from the same stories? Or is there an evolution of a new moment, a new way of seeing something? Because everything to me about the Mosaic, the book that I wrote, is about when you look at the same exact thing and see differently, then it doesn't matter that you say the same story, because it's no longer the same story. So how can you see the thing that you've always looked at differently than the way you're looking at it now? And what does that give you?
And by the way, I just want to add to that. I also find it really helpful in my conversations with people that I love, that if they are telling me a story that is really familiar, if I love them, I have an opportunity to point out that, at the right time, of course, that this is, I've heard this a lot of times.
Totally. I love that. I love that. What a good friend you are to the people that you love, because a lot of people leave those stories, and I'm going to take that you love me, because I'm going to take that you just did that for me too. So I appreciate that.
Oh, by the way, one of the things I loved about your story was how thoughtfully you expressed it, and how you used it as an example of how you had it's a fantastic example of the point that you want to make.
Yes.
And it will land in people's spirit in a way that is really refreshing.
Yeah, someone suggested that's my TED Talk, that story, but believe it or not. So, but I could talk with you forever because you are intoxicating. What I want to do is honor your time, which I've already, overstayed. I always end the podcast with the same question. And I'm interested to hear your perspective, because I have a feeling we're going to get something different than I normally hear, or not, whichever it is. When you look out the window at the world that you see, is this the world you always dreamed of handing over to your children and your children's children?
I'm going to surprise myself by my answer.
I love that, by the way.
Which is a quote from, I think it's Desiderata. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, this is still a beautiful world. Strive to be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, I like you, I mean, you know, I have to manage my social media feed so that I only get what I can process. But it's still a beautiful world.
Yeah. So one short follow-up, and then I want to let people know how to get in touch with you. But for people who have listened to you and are charmed by that humanness that you have, of just being a human being and doing the obvious and sort of seeing what's in front of them, and sometimes it's not going to be good, and sometimes it is, and that you look at this world and you see all its shams, but it's still a beautiful world. What's one thing that you would say to somebody who is not able to see that? They just look at the world and all its shams, and somehow they can't see that beautiful world. What one piece could you leave somebody with that would give them that piece? What's one PIECE that you could leave that would give them the PEACE?
I don't have any advice for them. I just love them. I just send you all my love, because I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. For those people who want to find you, and we didn't even talk about the rhinos. I mean, but you'll get it. I can't believe we never got there. Um, Lorna is incredibly passionate about saving the African rhinos. Why don't you just say a little bit about that just very quickly before we go, because I know it's important to you.
Well, I think the best advice I've ever had about making a difference in the world is you find the place that breaks your heart and go there. Start with what breaks your heart. And the fact that 3 rhinos a day are killed breaks my heart. I don't know why it breaks my heart rather than so many other things, but it does. And so that's where I am. And I'm working to try and find a new and collaborative way to save my beloved rhinos. And so if you go on my website, you'll be able to see a little bit about what we're doing. And if you're inspired, you can donate, but you can also reach out to me on my website, because I don't know what to do about it, but I can tell you that it matters to me more than any other single thing right now. So reach out to me and let's talk about how you might be able to help. But if rhinos are not your thing, go where your heart's breaking.
Love that. Her website, by the way, is lornadavis.net. So lornadavis.net. I can't invite you enough to go and involve yourself in any way possible with Lorna. You would think from the conversation and the feeling that I've had that we were friends for 100 years, but we met each other about 18 seconds ago before we started this podcast. And it's those moments, those places in time that when we just allow them to happen, where something really rich happens. And what I love about her also is the fact that she walks into this opportunity agendaless. So many people walk in and thinking, well, what's in it for me? And how will we do this? And how are we going to play? But when you walk in agendaless, you let the opportunity give you the opportunity rather than predetermining what that opportunity is. So it's my honor to introduce you, Mosaic people, to someone who doesn't know it, but is a dear, dear friend of mine now from the hour and some minutes we spent together. You've touched me, Lorna, and I believe you've touched people here on the podcast. And I thank you for that intoxicating touch. that just out of nowhere just surprises us. Take a moment to do the obvious. Take a moment to follow the opportunity, and take a moment to see the world that you see differently, and let us know what you see. I look forward to having you again. Lorna, thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate it. And my dogs just decided to start barking. Which
There you go. Perfect timing. See, everything's perfect. Okay, thank you so much. And for those of you who are a podcast, if you like it, like the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, like it, give a review of it, come back again next time, subscribe to it so that you can feel these conversations come to you whenever they come. Thank you for being here. Thank you for donating your time and giving it to us. Have a great holiday season, and big love to all of you.